Hello, everybody, and welcome. My apologies. If you hear me saying I'm clicking on the button, I'm still trying to figure out this YouTube Live. So forgive me for that, but we are here. Actually, you know what? This is meeting number 4, not meeting number 3. I'm super excited about that. I should quickly make that change. Oh, look, there's my slide deck. Leave it to Belinda. There you go. Got to keep on working, right? All right. So welcome to meeting number 4. This is the Charleston Power BI user group meeting. So super excited about that. And I'm MsBelindaAllen. I'm your host today. I'm going to guide you through getting going here. So let's move on. A couple things I want to talk about first, though. I want to talk a little bit about the chapter user, or the whole Power BI user group altogether. If you are not actively a member, you should be. It's a pretty awesome free source of information. How often do you get free learning? And you get to hear amazing people like Amanda, who we're going to hear today. So by all means, join the Power BI user group. And particularly, you're welcome to join the Charleston chapter 8. On average, about 8 out of every 12 of our meetings will be remote, so you can attend remotely. Or you're perfectly welcome to come to Charleston, South Carolina. It's quite beautiful here. We are very lucky, Amanda, that Stephen Siciliano attended our very first meeting. So I was like, oh, I was so in awe. So that was pretty awesome. And I also want to point out that next month, in the month of, well, not next month, the month after next, in October, is the Power Platform Summit in sunny Orlando, Florida. And this is a giant user event. It's for all of the Dynamics family of Microsoft, plus the Power Platform. So there's the whole Dynamics 365, there's Dynamics Business Central, Dynamics GP, and so CRM and AX are included as part of that, and so is NAV, and then there's the Power Platform. Power BI, which is very near and dear to my heart. Well, who am I kidding? I love them all. Power Apps, Flow, love them all. And you could attend sessions from any section you want to attend. So it's really very cool. It's going to be held at the Gaylord. By all means, wear your walking shoes, because the Gaylord hotels are very, very large. And I do want to point out also, if you go to the Power BI user group website, there are still quite a few world tours left, which are 2-day events usually for the Power Platform. Quite a few in Europe, and I think a couple in Canada. I know there's one in September, I believe, in Toronto. So by all means, I don't know why I keep saying that, but attend one of those. I think you'll find it pretty darn fascinating. We have some upcoming meetings. I do want to point out that the next month's meeting, September, is going to be an in-person meeting. And all the chapter leaders, there's 3 of us. There's Retta Chofani and Rhett Cipher and myself. We are all going to present real-life use cases, how we're using the Power Platform. And we don't have the date settled yet. Unfortunately, my co-leader, Rhett, had a death in the family. And so my hearts and my thoughts and my well wishes go out to him and his family. But we're working on getting it scheduled. So we'll let everyone know as soon as possible. In October, because of the summit, I'm still trying to work out how we're going to get that done. I might try to do the meeting with somebody live while I'm at Summit. I don't know. We'll see how that works out, but or we might do it before or after. So we'll hang on. Stay tuned for the October schedule. Before I introduce Amanda and we get started with Amanda today, I do want to put this QR code up. This is a questionnaire. I want to see if anybody's interested in getting more involved in the Power BI user group, particularly the Charleston chapter. So it is bit.ly.pbiug with PBIUG in all capital letters, or you can use this QR code to get access. Now, before I move on to the next slide, I'm so excited about today's speaker. If you're like me, you eagerly watch all of the new feature videos that come out with Power BI, because you know we get a new one every single month. And it is usually the lovely Miss Amada Cofsky. And Amanda, I think of her as the queen of new features, but she is much more than that. She is extremely knowledgeable in Power BI, and it's an active team member. She just happens to be the face of those new features. And when every time I hear her name or I see her in person at an event, I get a little intimidated, Amanda, sometime to walk up and go, "Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you." But the fact is, that's the truth. I get super excited when I see you pop up on the screen and when I see you in person. So, and you're here today to talk about storytelling, right? Visualization and storytelling.
Yes. Yes,
Okay, so
exactly.
yeah, so you guys know me, I'm a little bit crazy, so let me see if I can get um, the screen switched over to Miss Amanda, and you should be able to share your screen now.
Yes, I'm sharing my desktop.
And while she's sharing,
now.
everybody, I do want to point out, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. Amanda's going to be taking the questions at the end of the presentation. So, so feel free to go ahead and ask any question that you have. I'll keep an eye on them. And otherwise, Amanda, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I feel like you oversold me a little, but
No.
hopefully I can live up to the hype. Like mentioned earlier, my name is Amada Cofsky. I'm a senior program manager, specifically on the Power BI desktop team. And as mentioned, I do the monthly videos and blogs around the new features, but in my day-to-day job, I'm a program manager specifically for the reporting and visualization space of Power BI. And so I'm here to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, data visualization and storytelling. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to explain why storytelling with data matters, talk about through some different essential rules or tips or tenets, whatever you want to call them, to follow whenever you are building out your Power BI reports to make sure that the content that you're building tells a good story, and then also talk about how you can use some features to really make your Power BI report shine. So to start off, I'm going to talk about why storytelling matters. And I'm going to start off with this example here. Here's an example of a report that someone has made at some point in the past. And there's quite a few problems with this report, I would say. But some of the biggest ones are things like the story. There is no story whatsoever, and so people will just look at this, and the visuals aren't going to stick in your head. People aren't going to remember it later. And if people don't remember your report, what's the point of them even looking at it? It also uses a lot of pretty bad chart types, has formatting that's a little over the top with all the drop shadows and the 3D, not the greatest color scheme. All of this combined creates, frankly, a fairly bad report that is just not going to work for the end user. They're not going to be able to really understand anything and remember it later. Moving on to a less extreme version, but a very common, if maybe a little bit empty example of a Power BI report. And I see quite a few reports that look like this, again, maybe with some more visuals on it, but very similar to this. And again, this report is not the greatest. It still has no story. Sure, the visuals are a little more normal, I would say, in terms of what we build, but again, not memorable. No one's going to be able to tell you, an hour later what they understood from looking at your report. So why are these mistakes so common? A lot of times when we're building out reports, we tend to focus on the what and the how. So what do I want to show? How am I going to show it? And we don't so much think about the why, but that's actually the central thing that you need to focus on. That's the center of the circle, the thing that matters the most. Why are we building this? What are we trying to share? Because typically whenever you're building a report, there is a purpose. If there's not, you're pretty much wasting your effort. So you want to focus on what do your end users care about? Why do they need this information? And that should then influence the how and the what. So the goals of storytelling with data is really about making sure that the information is interpreted correctly. The heart of it is the question, the why. Why does this matter? Why do they need to know this? And it motivates people to explore further. It entices them to play with the report. It makes them want to go in there and start clicking on things and finding their own insights and really connecting with the data. And so if you're just throwing visuals on a page, they're not going to be, you're not going to really help them do these things. They're not going to be able to be entertained, be interested, and find the information that matters to them. So to help with this, I have 5 rules, just five, so it should be easy to remember. 5 rules to help you tell a story with your data. And the first one is that you need to start by thinking about your end users. A lot of times when people, they sit down at their desk and they're like, I need to build a Power BI report. I need to open up Power BI desktop and just start throwing visuals on a page. And that's actually, even though I work on the Power BI desktop team, not what I recommend. I don't recommend you just jump into Power BI desktop and start playing. That tends to result in you just finding things that are interesting to you and putting those on a page, not what's actually interesting to your end users, the people in your business that are going to be consuming those reports. So you need to actually start way before that. You need to learn about your audience needs. I tend to recommend, if you're in the same location as them, actually going to their desk, sitting down with them and talking with them. If that's not possible, setting up a call, or at least start chatting in like Teams or Skype or something so that you guys can actually discuss as close to face-to-face as possible what their actual needs are. And while you're there with them, actually start prototyping things. And I don't mean, when I say prototyping, building something in Power BI desktop. Just whiteboard out some examples of what you think the report should look like, what kind of charts are you going to have, or what kind of data. Just sketch it out, get their feedback right there, and iterate on that until you get an idea on paper that tends to make sense. And then, once you have that, go and start building out your reports, because that's going to save you so much time. It's a lot easier to erase something on a whiteboard and redraw it as a different chart or different data than it is to completely, start your Power BI report over. I know it can be quite time-consuming to build them, so don't just jump in. Learn about your users. And then, of course, you will continue to get their feedback. Their needs will change, and you'll need to adjust your report. But at least you start off with a strong foundation if you start first with what your audience needs. Once you have the idea of the report and you have to start putting things on the page, you need to start thinking about the layout of your report. What is it going to look like? And this can be very important because people tend to have, especially nowadays, pretty short attention spans. We get distracted really easily, at least I know I do. And so people might not be spending hours staring at your reports. They might have, they're getting millions of emails, people stop by their office. And so a lot of times they'll just be spending a couple minutes at a time with your report. And people just naturally tend to, their eyes, when they look at something, is going to focus, as you can see in this graphic. First, they're going to focus just kind of like vaguely in the center, and then they start to go and basically read through it like they would a book. So, the top left corner is going to be where their eyes go first, and then they're going to read left to right in a row, and then move down and read left to right again, just like they would read a book. Of course, this is cultural based, so if you're somewhere where instead it makes you read right to left instead of left to right, that top right corner would then be the place that you go. So consider the culture of where you are building your reports for, and keep that layout in mind, because if you're only going to spend a minute for your report, you want them to see that most important KPI or that most important metric first. And then also, as you are building out your reports and starting to put things on the page, think about the alignment, making sure everything is neat and aligned. you'll be surprised by how much things just being off a couple of pixels or two can be quite distracting for people. And also think about spacing. You want your report to look neat and organized. That tends to make people trust it more, like if it's well formatted and it looks nice. And we have now in Power BI, when building out your reports, those red dashed lines that snap to grid and the little dashed lines that let you know if you're aligning with the things around you in the canvas. So take advantage of those and actually.
Can I interrupt you and just say thank you for those?
Yeah. It was a long time coming, and actually we got that from an intern project, so thank the intern, not me. It was very exciting, and it does make such a big difference to your report if you can actually spend the time to make everything evenly spaced and lined up with each other. And generally, you're going to want the same spacing between everything, except for where it helps with your story. And so, like in this slide, really the point is that the things that are that tell the same story or reference the same data are going to want to have the same consistent spacing. And then maybe if you have a couple of different visuals that are on different topics within the same page, space those out a little bit more. Still consistently, but more, so you can see like the visual on the left is by itself with a big gap between the big square where one, and then there's another equally spaced big gap between the next two visuals, which if they have related data can have a little bit smaller of a distance between them. The being able to space things like that and take advantage of not cramming everything into your report and actually intentionally spacing things can really help your user actually understand things better. It helps them. It helps with their cognitive load when consuming your report. Part of layout is also to think about what's going to be a background of your report. What is it going to, the wallpaper, the page background, what is it going to look like? We do like when people upload images is the backgrounds, but we do like for them to do it very intentionally. Just don't pick something very a lot of like fine detail and a lot going on, a very busy image that can be distracting and pulls the user away from the visuals you're trying to show, since those are supposed to be, in the forefront of what their users are seeing. But do take advantage of that to actually build out nice grids for you to lay out your report on, and create a good space for you to drop your visuals on. And there are a lot of good tools for building out these backgrounds that are out there that you can take advantage of. I'm going to go through 4 real quick, and they go from, I guess, the easiest probably to the more intense version, depending on what your needs are. PowerPoint, if you just need something really simple, is actually really good for this. You can draw shapes with them, and then they have an option to just export whatever slides you have. Once you build out, like, say this is how you want your visuals to be laid out, you can export it as a PNG, import that into Power BI as your page background, and then you can just lay out your visuals on top of it and not have to worry about the spacing because you already have that grid available to you. If you don't want to do it yourself, there is a great resource online. The one I tend to mention the most is PowerBI.tips. They have some layouts available for free, and the screenshot's actually old. They have a ton more now than what I'm showing in the screenshot. They have basically already done this work for you and created a bunch of different layouts, and you can just go and download a file, open it, and then put your visuals on top of the layouts they have designed for you. So you could go there and download them. You can also choose, if you want to build your own, but go a little bit fancier than what PowerPoint can do. There is a great tool online called Canva that basically allows you to build out your own templates. You can even add like little icons or imagery, or have custom text components that are built into your background. And then again, you can just export it and have and import that into your Power BI report.
I use Canva a lot, and I never thought about using it for a background. I am blown away. That is so smart.
Yeah, I didn't know about it either. Originally, I actually learned about this from Profi, another MVP of ours, and I love it. It's such a great, easy way to be able to build out your backgrounds in advance and then just take advantage of them in Power
Fabulous.
BI.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I just got excited.
Oh, yeah, it's great. That was probably my personal favorite. I think it's the right level of customization to Power, but not being too hard. So I think that was my personal favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, which gives you the most flexibility, but probably is also the most work, is that you can actually do this yourself by building out a Power BI template in Power BI Desktop. We allow you to basically align, you can insert, like, say, a bunch of empty visuals or shapes where you want to build out your grid and a background and import a theme, lay out images and text, and then just save that instead of as a PBIX file as a PBIT, a Power BI template, and then you can just use that as your starting place every time you want to start a Power BI report, and all that stuff will be in there, and then you just import your data and away you go without having to worry about all that styling stuff. So we tend to recommend this one for larger organizations, because then someone in the org can build out one template and share it with everyone who's building out reports, and then everyone has a consistent starting place and a consistent look and feel for their reports. So that was layouts. The next rule is around choosing the right chart type. There's a lot of good information out there around what different charts should you use for different types of questions or analysis that you need to do. So this slide right here has one way to categorize the different charts for how you want to use them. There's a lot of other ways and thought processes behind it as well. For example, this image is another way to sort them. That's from Visually that you can find online. I put a link down there on the slide. And SQL BI as well also has a really good visual reference as well. So I typically recommend people who are going to be building out reports to find their favorite way, the way that makes sense to them, whether it's that first slide or this or SQL BIs or some other infographic somewhere that explains these topics. Find your favorite, print it out, and then just like tape it on the wall next to you at your desk so that you can reference it anytime you need to start building out your reports. Because it's so important to use the right visual for the data you have. Because if you use the wrong chart type, people aren't going to be able to find the insight you're hoping they'll find. But this is probably one of the most important aspects to building out your Power BI reports. And even as you are building out your reports and your visuals, once you pick out the right visual type, you also have to make sure that you use the visual in the right way. So I have a few slides about some of the more common chart types that people use and suggestions on ways to use them well versus not. So starting out with the most common chart type to use, the column chart. Since column charts are mostly meant for comparison, it's really important to format them in a way that's going to make that comparison easy. So, for example, start your axis at 0, which is the default in Power BI, but we do allow you to change that axis start and end points. And we typically don't recommend you do that unless you really, really need to for some reason. Because if not all your charts start at 0, you're not going to be able to clearly compare across them, and it can actually really skew the differences between the different points and make it even harder to compare within the visual itself. And we also recommend sorting your charts intentionally so that if, say, you need to compare, like in this slide about the sorting chart bullet point, if you wanted to compare states against each other, it's really hard to in this example because then the top chart Alaska's first, and then the bottom chart California's first. So then you're constantly hunting for the same state in both of the charts, and it's impossible to compare across them. So making sure if you have two charts next to each other that you want to compare, sorting them in the same order is going to be really helpful for your end users. And then lastly, a lot of times with a column chart, if you just have like 10 or 20 values within the column chart, it's really hard for users to know You know, at what point do they need to, for example, be concerned? What point is something too low or too high, or what is my goal versus not my goal? And so we recommend augmenting your charts with reference lines or using color to draw attention to certain things so that you can tell which values are meeting the conditions versus not, or which ones are, you know, good or bad or need attention to focus on them. A common question I actually get quite a bit is when should I use a column chart versus a bar chart? They're very similar charts. They're basically the same thing rotated one way or the other. But I typically recommend bar charts whenever you have either really long labels because of the way the labels like South, Midwest, Northeast are oriented in a bar chart. Long labels are a lot easier to read and see within the bar chart. So if you have long labels, I'd recommend a bar chart. Or if you have a lot of columns where you're going to end up having a scroll bar, it's a lot easier for someone to scroll vertically up and down than it is for them to scroll horizontally. And so if you're going to have a scroll bar, a lot of times the bar chart is the better choice as well. The other decision you have to make within the column and bar chart family is which type of column or bar chart you want to use, stacked versus clustered versus 100% stacked. And that really depends on what the goal of the chart is. So stacked column charts are really good for showing the totals. It's like in this example, East, Central, and West, you can really clearly see total-wise which one is winning versus having a lower value. And it gives you a good sense of part to whole as well, so you can fairly clearly see that the gray bar, whichever value that is, moderation, is taking up the biggest segment of the each of the bars. But if you instead need to say compare moderation east versus moderation central versus moderation west, that can be really hard in a stacked column chart because they're not starting at the same place. So that's whenever you'd want to switch over to a clustered column chart. Since every single bar is starting at 0, it's a lot easier to make those inter and intra-category comparisons. So that's when you're going to want to switch over to a clustered. And then lastly, the 100% stacked column chart is really good whenever you need to show things like percent changes over time. So like if each one was a year, you want to see how the percentage-wise, how much, you know, was sold in moderation versus convenience and how that changes over time. And anytime really you don't need to know the absolute numbers, but the percentages instead, that's when you're going to want to use the 100% stacked. Line charts are obviously a really good choice and should be probably your default whenever you're considering a time field. That's the natural reaction to put them in a line chart, which is correct. But we typically recommend making sure when you're using it, making sure that you have the right aspect ratio for your chart. With line charts, it's really easy to say make it really tall and narrow and basically make it seem like different peaks and valleys within your data are more extreme than they are. So making sure that it's much longer horizontally than it is vertically will make sure that you're not lying or hiding different issues and data points that are of interest to your users. The other thing to consider with line charts, which is pretty interesting, is should my line chart have a categorical or a continuous axis? And really that depends on if you're going to have how many data points you have. If you have thousands of data points, a continuous axis tends to show that better. Whereas if you have fewer data points, a categorical chart is going to end up being a lot better for you, especially if you have a lot of missing data or breaks. Because categorical, you're actually, the points won't be connected to each other, and you're actually able to see those dips. And so, I typically recommend trying both the categorical and the continuous axis for your data, and seeing which one really just works better for the amount of data and the form of your data. Tree maps are really good in terms of visualizing the proportions of your data, which ones have a higher or lower percentage of my data falls into those categories. And this is typically going to be your best choice in this category of visuals. Another visual very similar, pie charts and donut charts don't always show the data in the best way and tend to be harder to read. Tree maps, because of the square nature of them, tend to be able to show a lot more denser data and still be readable for your users. So this visual probably should be your natural reaction whenever you need to show proportions. And it's also really good because it handles drill down really easily, as you can see in these two visuals where I just drilled down one level. You maintain those. It makes it a lot easier for you to see the different groupings and maintain the coloring appropriately. Pie charts and pie charts / donut charts are the other option, and there are some people who infamously hate the pie chart and they wish it would die and they never want to see it again. I'm
laughing, Amanda, because at every MVP meeting, anytime someone brings up a pie chart, there's a collective moan across the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everyone tends to hate the pie chart, but there's still executives out there who are like, I've always seen it as a pie chart, I must see it as a pie chart, and you have to deal with that. So we do have some best practices when using a pie chart to make them more readable. For example, don't put too many things on them. Like the first one looks more like the Wheel of Fortune than an actual pie chart because it just has too many slices. So typically 3 to 5 categories is the right number to show. If you have more, I'd recommend having a slicer with just a few in there by default and allowing users to check and uncheck the others to compare across them. And also have your data labels on. It's really hard to know the exact number of any of the values in the pie chart because there's no axis to show that. So if you actually put the data labels on, like at this good pie chart example, where instead of the category label being the label for the slices, I put on the legend and then switch the labels to be the number and percentage. That makes it very clear to the user which slices have what values. Related to that is also pick the right sort order. So sort so that as you go around clockwise in the pie chart, the bigger slices come first, so that whenever there's two slices that are very close to each other, like the pink and the yellow in my good pie chart example, you can tell, but maybe you can't tell from looking at the slices which one is bigger, but you know because yellow came first, that one is at least slightly bigger than the pink one. And so sort order and data labels are pretty much a must when it comes to pie charts and donut charts to make them readable. And then scatter charts are really good about seeing distributions of 2 or more variables. So if you have 2 measures and you need to compare across them, or maybe 3 even if you take size into consideration, scatter chart is definitely the way to go. And they're really nice because you can see a lot of different types of insights within the one visual. You can find outliers, or you can find clusters of data within your pie chart. And you can even use time to on our scatter charts as well, so you can play through them and see how the data changes over time. And in terms of playing over time, the scatter chart is actually the only visual in Power BI natively that lets you do that. There is a custom visual that will let you play through time as well, but native integration, if you want to see things change over time, the scatter chart is a really good visual for that. The thing to really pay attention to with scatter charts, though, is that you want to be careful with your color and also how many legend items you have for it, because there's so many dots going to be on your visual. If you have too many colors, they can start overlapping. It can be hard to see them. It can also be really hard to tell the difference between them. So be careful with the colors you pick so that everything doesn't just start looking really muddled and blending together. For table and matrix, my advice around these tend to be to keep them as simple as possible. I have a lot of bullet points here that basically just amount to don't cram too much in, make sure there's white space, don't make them too colorful, don't go crazy with designing them. The point of the table and the matrix is to just show me the numbers, so focus on showing the numbers. I do recommend, especially now that we have icon sets in our table and matrix, to take advantage of those to call out just the values that are the most important you need to pay attention to, like using symbols to say, like, okay, this one, the -4, that's the thing that's bad, that's the thing you should pay attention to. Let me add an icon just there so your eye gets drawn to it. And typically, I think icons are a better choice than, say, using conditional formatting to color the text or to color the background, because whenever you start using conditional formatting with colors, you have to start worrying about color blindness or other vision issues like that can make it harder for users to actually find that insight. With shapes, you don't have that problem as much. You know, down arrow versus an up arrow. You don't need to be able to see color to know what that means. So icons are definitely the way to go.
I'm glad you mentioned the color blindness for people when doing the conditional formatting, because I don't think as people realize that so many people are colorblind. 1 in 8 men are colorblind, and 1 in 200 and something women are colorblind. But if you start thinking of 1 in 8 men, that's a lot of people that are colorblind.
You're guaranteed to have at least one person consuming your report be colorblind, and you don't want to make their life miserable not being able to get any information out of your table. So it's definitely, with the introduction of icon sets, I tend to push people that way instead of the color way, if possible. And then my last visual for this deck is the slicers. And there's 2 main things to get out of this slide. The first is pick the right slicer type for your data. So if you have a long list, pick a drop-down because you don't want to use up all of your space. If you have dates, focus on either the range date slicer or the relative date slicer. Don't use a list of dates. That doesn't make as nearly as much sense. List and chiclet slicers, I really tend to think of as more like what's going to be the main end user way they're going to interact with the slicer. If it's going to be mostly in touch and mobile, a chiclet slicer is so much better for touch than it is a list. So pick the right slicer for both the end user and the data. And then, most importantly, please group your slicers in the same spot on your report page and consistently across all of your pages. Don't make your users hunt around for them every single time. If you decide the top along the top of your page is where you want them to go, every single page that needs a slicer, put them at the top of the page so the users just get in the habit of looking there for them. Moving things around on your end users is just going to make their life a lot more difficult. My 4th rule, kind of referencing back to conditional formatting comment I made earlier, is to just use color wisely. There's a lot, you would think color doesn't really matter, just because it's like, it's just like a design thing, it doesn't really matter, right? But it really does. It really can make a difference. It can make your report feel, if your report feels branded, for example, like say if you work for Coca-Cola and you use red colors within your reports, that makes it feel like, you know, something that's like official and Coca-Cola branded and right, and therefore people are going to actually trust that report more than something that's, say, all these blue colors everywhere. And so color actually does make a big difference, both in terms of how people feel about the report and also the usability of it when you go back to thinking about the color contrast and accessibility and color blindness. So there's many reasons you need to focus on your colors. And there are a lot of good tools out there to help you with this as well. So again, marketing-wise, if you work at a major company or a big organization, they might have branding colors. I know Microsoft does. that they recommend using. And so you can check with them to see if there's any color or style guides you should follow. And if you do, then you can use those colors. If not, and you want to just like go your own way and make your own colors, there are a lot of different options online that you can reference. For example, there's the Color Brewer, which actually has an option to pick colorblind friendly colors. And so that's a good option. You can use Adobe's Color Reels or a couple of other sites. And so you can go, there's even some tools out there that if you have like an image you think is particularly pretty or your company's logo, you can actually upload that and color palettes can be generated from those images for you to use within Power BI. If you are creating your own colors though, I definitely recommend using the Contrast Analyzer tool. I have a link here to it. It's something you can just go and download yourself, and you can actually create like lenses which will allow you to see what your report would look like if, say, the user was colorblind and they couldn't see the difference between red or greens or between yellows and blues. And there's actually different forms of color blindness that have, where people with the different types would have different colors. They have a hard time telling them apart. So you can actually simulate all those different types of color blindness. You can even see what it would look like if someone can't see color at all and only in grayscale, which is another thing you have to think about. So this would be a good way to basically test your color palette and prove that it's a good one that you want to start using for all of your reports. As you start using those colors, building out those color palettes and using them in Power BI as well, you should also think about how those colors are going to be used within the visuals, and that will influence what types of colors you're going to want to use. For example, sequential color palettes, where you stick to one or maybe two shades of color and you go from lighter to darker within them. And that's going to be really useful if the things you want to care about is something increasing or decreasing. You have like one measure and it's going to go one way or the other. A sequential color palette is going to be really good for that. Whereas if there's something that's like has two extremes and then like a happy middle, you're going to want to use divergent color palettes. For example, maybe something like temperature. You don't want something to be too cold or too hot. You can have blue on one end and red on the other, and in the middle is like a nice white color. And that will let people see like, oh, this number's going too high or too low, or is it just right in the middle? And then if the data doesn't have really any logical ordering like that based off of a measure, it's just a bunch of categorical data, which each needs their own colors. That's when you're going to want to use a qualitative color palette, each color being unique. And that's really where you're going to need to worry about making sure that the colors are different enough that they're distinguishable between them. You don't want to have two blues that are like almost the same but not quite, and users can't tell the difference between them, and they just start mixing up which category goes with which data point. Another way to think about colors whenever you're building out your reports is to think about the different there's a couple of different ways you can pick out and use your colors. And a lot of times like that Adobe Color Wheel takes advantage of this kind of the structure. You can think about things like this, the bottom left one, the triad. Each color is on opposite ends of the color wheel. And so they're all going to be very distinct from each other. They're going to be very different. But they typically, as long as you do it like this in a triangle around the color wheel, they're still going to be harmonious with each other. They're not going to look, like clash with each other basically. And so if you want to have distinctive colors, doing something like this around the color wheel is a great way to do that. Another way is to focus on, like in the top one, having one central color and just going slightly to the left and slightly to the right within the color wheel. The colors will all be basically in the same family, and then so therefore they're of course going to look really well together. But if you go the right distance apart, they should still be distinct enough that you can tell the difference between them. as long as you stick to, like, say, 4 or less colors so that there's not too many that you're trying to squeeze in there within that range. And then, of course, the bottom right one, the monochromatic scale, is really good for, again, going back to that the previous slide with sequential colors. The last comment on colors is just some high-level bullet points to focus on. First is, typically, you're not going to want to have more than 3 to 5 colors on a single visual. After a certain point, having more colors can just make it, it can be really overwhelming depending on what colors they are. And also it makes it just harder to make sure that all the colors are unique enough across all the different forms of color blindness and grayscale to be able to tell the difference between all the different data points. And even with this within the same hue, like at this bottom right chart, usually, for most people, unless you're a designer, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between more than, say, 5 colors of the same hue, because then they just start getting too close to each other. And then, lastly, it's typically good to have a meaning behind the colors. Either it could be something like red is bad and green is good. Probably pick different colors because of color blindness, but you get the idea. Having one color mean bad across all your reports and report pages, and another meaning good. Or if you're going to have, say, a category and a bunch of different categories, making sure that same color is used for that category anywhere it appears is going to be really important as well. If the colors start having meaning to their your end users, they don't have to keep referencing the legend, and they're going to be able to understand the chart a lot quicker once it starts clicking what these different colors mean. And then my last rule is around creating interactive experiences. So we have a lot of great features in Power BI that allow you to take your reports kind of basically, I feel like, to the next level and really allow your users to start engaging with your reports. So, for example, the first one I wanted to call out was being able to create different interactions on your page with bookmarks and buttons. And I actually have this report to demo. Hopefully you will be able to see it real quick. This report is a great example of using bookmarks and buttons to create different interactions. And so instead of using like the normal page tab, for example, he set up his own navigation here with hover effects on the buttons, so it makes it really clear that they're buttons that can be interacted with. There are, even within the one page, he set up tab controls to allow you to switch out what data and what visuals are being shown into these different topics. And you can even, this report author even set up like hover effects, so you can click and then see the visual in focus mode. And so being able to like actually take your report and make it, instead of just something static that they're going to consume, into an app that they start interacting with, is really going to make a difference. It's going to make users want to engage with it. They're going to start playing with it. And once they start playing, they're going to start remembering things more. They're going to be able to talk about the data they saw in your report more and more in meetings and actually start making changes based off of that data. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of the bookmarking. It can be kind of time consuming, I'm going to be honest, to build out these kind of controls, but it really does just make a difference. And so if you have a report that's going to have a lot of interactions, I recommend taking the time to do this. My next tip is around, within this topic, is around disclosing information progressively. Basically, don't overload your users with all kinds of information on one page. Slowly reveal the information as they start requesting it with either drill through or report page tooltips. So you can see here on the actual report page, I only showed the main cards, like Australia's sales, Canada's sales, Germany's sales. And only when the user actually started hovering over the point and showing interest in, say, Canada, do I pop up this extra information around drilling down deeper into what does that number mean for Canada? And so you can even use both together, where you show some information on the tooltip, and then if they really want to know more than what's shown in the tooltip, then they can right-click and drill through to a page that has all kinds of information. So don't overload your end user with all the information at once. Progressively disclose it using drill through and tooltips. And lastly, the other suggestion I typically have in terms of this, especially in terms of like getting users to engage with your report, is to let them ask questions. We have a way that you can actually add Q&A to your reports. And so that they, as an end user, can click on a button and have this pop-up come up where they can type their own questions about their data and have a chart type pop up. And you can even pre-populate this left section with questions to like prompt them to start asking questions and seeing the type of questions they can ask with Q&A. And this is going to do two things. One, what I already mentioned of getting users to engage more and play with your report, but it's also going to enable them to ask their own questions without always having to come back to you as the report author. You want to empower your users as much as possible so that like every single time someone has a new question, one they haven't asked before, you don't have to go back and update the report for everyone. You can just tell them, oh, go ask the question using Q&A, and they can get the result back, and you didn't have to do any like extra work to actually incorporate it into the report and republish it for everyone. So this, I definitely recommend this both as a time saver for you, the analyst, and also in terms of empowering and engaging your end users. So that was all of my 5 tips that I had for you today. I included this one slide because I did want to thank some people that I took some of the knowledge that they have shared with me and incorporated into this deck, and I want to point them out because I think they are great resources as well. Prathi, Miguel, Sujata, and the Power BI Tips guys, they all have really great content in this as well. So if you're interested and you want to learn more, I would definitely look them up and see when they're giving a presentation, or you can follow them on Twitter, however you want to engage. But they also are really great resources in this area. So that was all I had. I don't know if there are questions.
Well, mostly we're just oohing and awing over some of this. But I have a couple of things. Can you go back to the demo you had of that U.S. data? I saw an option on there that I'm guessing it works the way I'm expecting. So this is just a shot in the dark, but I want people to see this. Would you click on Guide up at the top next to the benchmark analysis? And yes, that was what I expected. So a lot of people don't realize that you could actually do things like this. So this person has built in directions or guidelines on how to use this application right on the top, which I think is quite amazing. I've learned, oh my gosh, so much, Amanda. Thank you. I got so many great ideas. But one question or one thing I'd like you to comment on, because your talk on colors was really great, and I feel like so important. Now with the apps that people, where you can create an app, which I think is one of the coolest things in Power BI service. I think the user interface for that is, especially combined with this guide, which is why I wanted to show you, I think it will change the whole adoption rate for so many people. But I mean, I guess we really need to keep from making people colorblind. I guess we really need to be careful about how we select the app colors so that, like, the navigation pane on the left doesn't completely clash with the report.
Yes, that is very important to focus on. We really are trying to build features to allow you to create apps with Power BI, not just static reports, which is, these guides and using bookmarks, and then all this new app navigation that you're starting to see in the Power BI service, and even more is coming in that area for the Power BI service. These things are all around making you create apps, but with great power comes great responsibility. So it's important that you do think about the design of it. So yes, the color of your apps should be harmonious with the color of your reports. And once you get full control over, controlling how the UI of the service looks in the app, you want to make sure that like the text colors and the background colors are so readable. There's enough contrast between them. Typically the recommendation is that there should be at least a 4:1, if not higher, ratio between the foreground and the background of things. And so focusing on those and color blindness is going to be really important to make sure everyone can get the insights from your reports.
And I don't know why I'm going backwards from the last thing you talked about to the first, but as I keep moving up the list, when you were talking about the charts and like comparing the clustered column charts to the custom bar charts and so forth, sometimes, and this is one of the reasons why I tend to stay away a lot from trees, is sometimes there's an outlier that, and the one you have in the middle there is a perfect example of that. The all-season one is like way outnumbering the rest of the data there. And so I know in Power BI you can like opt to remove a particular value so that while you're doing evaluations. Are you seeing many people do things with bookmarks to like remove that outlier so you can focus more on those smaller numbers, or have you?
I think that is an excellent use of bookmarking. I'm going to confess I haven't seen anyone do that yet. That doesn't mean no one's doing it, though. I only get to see so many end-user reports. But I think that's an excellent idea because bookmarking can say filter states as well. So you, as an analyst, if you see there's an outlier in the data, you can actually preset that up so that you have the one version, which is everything, and then the remove outliers button that will exclude those options and just show the rest of the data.
Yeah, because when we're looking at when you get rid of the all-season one, like if you're looking at the West, and well, there's a couple of things there. I guess regular and central, you can barely tell what they are, and
yeah, they are very low.
It's I find or as someone is mentioning, Sean Dord is on watching, and he said, or to identify outliers. But one of the things that I'm finding is, and this is one reason why I tend not to like the tree very much, is there's always usually something that is predominant, which makes all the other spaces very, very small. But yeah, I don't know what, I'd never done that before with bookmarking, but I thought about that as you were going through. So see, you had my brain working, which is a good thing at the end of the day. So, and then let's see, I had, I do have a slicer hack that I do a lot with the year, if I have a year table, because if you create a slicer and you bring out a year, then it's always going to end up being a slider. And even if you take away the slider, you still basically have a slider. So I'll tend to create a slicer with some other text field, and then I'll replace the year with it. And then that way I can create a drop-down list for the year, or I can create, make it horizontal so it looks like little boxes. So that's just a little hack that I do, because you're going to always, like your customer ID slicer or value there where you can put the beginning and the end range. Every time I start with the date, I always end up with something that looks like that. So what I do is I'll bring in like the department name, so I end up with a different kind of box, and then I turn and switch it. So that's just Belinda's hack. I don't know how good that is, but the last thing that I loved so many things. I wrote so many notes. You got my creative juices flowing. And Sean said exactly the same thing. Yeah, he said exactly the same thing. He was writing awesome, awesome, awesome. One of the things you talked about at the beginning about talking to other people about the report, and that's something that as I've talked to people over the years in presenting, I always say, start with, draw it out on paper first. It'll save you a lot of time. But one of the things, the more I study about how people build reports, and Sean wrote, love that hack. Yeah. So one of the things that I found is that, and I've read this, and I found it to be absolutely true as I talk to people, is that when we start designing reports, we tend to try to prove what our theories are. So instead of coming in with a, like, I don't know what I don't know, we tend to try to build things out that support what we think. So I think that even makes it a bigger deal when we're to talk to other people and find out what they want. I do try to encourage people to do the insights. I love that you guys put the insights in. Most of the time, we don't see anything that's a big surprise, but every now and then there's something that'll make you go, huh. So thank you for that, because I do encourage people to run it regularly. And then go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, we're investing in those like insights and AI features as well quite a bit right now, because we do see the value in them and hoping you understand your data without you having to do all the clicks and building it yourself, and end up guiding yourself the way that, like you said, the way you think you need to go. So that's definitely an area we see as important and something we want to focus on.
I love it. And then the last thought I had when you were talking about the Q&A, and I never thought about just having a whole Q&A page, which I think is brilliant, so that's one of the notes I wrote. But that's where it's so important for, data modeling. So let me go back to that too, because if you start drawing out, that's another reason why you want to get an idea out beforehand, because if you start at your drawing board at the Power BI desktop, you might find you've ended up modeling your data inefficiently for what you end up wanting to achieve. Yeah, that's a big one. But modeling your data to get tribal language so that people can ask Q&A effectively. I know it can tell the difference between like town and city, but if you call your salespeople affiliates, it might not resonate that those are the same things. Seriously, my page is. Go ahead.
I was going to say the synonyms is a definitely important piece. If you have different ways to call the same thing within your company, make sure you add synonyms to your model for Q&A to make it better. And again, we do have some big plans coming for Q&A to make that experience even better as well. So look forward to some more improvements in that.
Well, you had Sean commented about how he loves the formatting and he's using the icons. He was booing the pie charts with me. We both agree we like pizza pies, and he likes apple and I like pumpkin better than a regular pie. And so we were kind of having fun with that. But this has been absolutely fantastic. Amanda, you are amazing. So I am super excited that you took the time to spend with us this afternoon. And I got to go think about my notes and think about things more, because I have got new ideas, and I really appreciate this. Any closing words for us?
I just wanted to thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity to present to you. I always love being able to share these kinds of things, because it makes everyone's life a lot better when they can start thinking about, some good rules to follow in terms of building out their reports. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who attended. I really appreciate that as well. I hope to see all of you at the summit that is coming up. Hopefully a lot of you can attend the in-person meeting we're going to have in the month of September. And otherwise, hopefully I'll catch you at like a world tour or something. So thank you to Amanda. Thank you to everybody else. And this is MsBelindaAllen, and I am closing the door for the evening. Thanks so much. Bye.